Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning, this is Stan in Gainesville, Florida. Today we're discussing, does a truck have a front and a back? Focus plans, IATSE interviews, student-mentor relationships, and I want to be in control, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Welcome, everyone, to episode 193.
Welcome back, approaching 200.
My God, 200 episodes. That's crazy.
It's time to quit. I keep telling you, it's time to quit.
Don't want to jump the shark.
Quit while you're on the top, I'm telling you.
Are you sure we're on the top? I don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question.
that's the next question. We still have to do our tour. We have to do the tour.
The tour, yeah, maybe
retire.
after the tour we retire. That's good.
Right. We'll do the retour. It'll be like our swan song.
We'll retire
tour.
in the Faroe Islands. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. So anyway, welcome everyone to episode 193. And we'd just like to thank Nils Thoresen once again for being with us last week. It was fantastic. Everything you want to know about drones is in episode 192 with Nils. And what an interesting interview that was. What do you guys think?
I liked it.
Yeah, it was a great show, and we urge you all to take a listen. It's great information about the present and future of live entertainment lighting.
You know what it made me think about? It made me think about, as a hobby this next summer, is maybe picking up a drone and starting to play with one. And maybe I'll get one with a light on it, and I can add it to my landscape lighting repertoire. And I'm thinking about it.
And get a camera and just go around the neighborhood.
Spy on the neighbors.
Yeah, I got a few neighbors who would probably take out their shotgun if I did that.
Exactly.
I'm just sort of fantasizing about, I didn't have a remote-controlled airplane when I was a kid. I really wanted one. But I did have a remote-controlled boat.
Okay.
That was fun.
That's cool. I never had a remote control to anything.
Yeah, but you're a pilot, so you know.
Well, I wasn't a kid when I was a pilot. I was actually grown up. But as a child, I was deprived and depraved.
That explains a lot. That explains a lot.
That's a whole story. Hey, guess what? We have some news today. News.
Lay it on us, brother. Lay it on us.
Here you go. And first of all, we're kind of late on this. This happened a few weeks ago, but our good friend Ann Valentino retired from IATSE, and
Mazel tov.
Boy, what a career! What a career!
Mazel tov.
Yeah, she's a smart girl.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, Mazel tov.
Yeah.
Is there an answer to Mazel tov?
Yeah, you just to say Mazel tov.
Deneyu or
You
something
do
like
something.
that?
You say, to life.
All right, life. Anyway,
I'm happy for her.
Well, we're all happy for her. She's a really good person. Everybody loves her, and she's given us some amazing stuff to play with. So thank you.
I'm not happy for her. Who am I going to call now when I have problems?
Her.
I can't call her at home.
She's not
I can't
there
call
anymore.
her at home.
What, are you going to call Ann, and she's like at home relaxing?
She'll love it. Come on.
She's watching Days of Our Lives. She's not going to want to talk to you.
She will.
Congratulations, Ann, and we'll see you at LDI. I'm sure you'll show up.
That's what I'm saying. She's not really gone. She's just retired.
Well, see, technically I'm retired.
People want to feel needed.
So anyway, okay. So also a couple of announcements. Stan had this fabulous interview on the Artistic Finance podcast, and we have a link of that on our Facebook page. So check it out. I learned absolutely nothing about saving money because I don't save money very well. But Stan, it was great. It really was. And I don't know. I just found it very interesting. Did you have a good time doing it?
I think I talk too much.
No, you talked. Actually, I thought it was good because Ethan doesn't talk that much.
Well, it's kind of odd to talk about yourself, and so I try to focus on things to give people things that were useful for their lives. And I hope it was informative.
But see, Ethan's doing what he's supposed to do. He is an interviewer. He says 7 words. You're an interviewee. You get to say 50 back. You're supposed to talk.
It's funny you say that, Stan, because I also did a webinar a few days ago on lighting for opera from the CSU Design Forum.
I went to it.
Yes, and there was a link on that on the Facebook page too. And I said the same thing. I got in, I don't know, about 5 minutes in. I said, I'm talking too much. It was actually ended my slideshow. And Scott said, well, you are the guest, Unlike your show, you are the guest. And so I talk a lot of shows on the show as well, so it really doesn't matter. But yeah, so that was a fun little thing we did there. Fred Kinney and Scott Bowman put together the whole thing, organized it, scheduled it, got everyone together, and it's been a fantastic series of interviews. So check out the CSU Design Forum website. If you just do a search, you'll find it. Or like I said before, we have a link posted on the Light Talk Facebook group page. Yeah, and Steve has some breaking news.
Yes, it's coming all the way from Paris, and it's breaking news on the 2024 Olympics. A whole new sport has been added. They're actually having to cut some of the aspects of boxing and wrestling to make time for this new event. And the new event will have 16 athletes in it, 16 men, 16 women, and it's called breaking.
Breaking? Do you break bones? I mean, what is this thing? What do you break?
Well, the Olympics, according to
do you break wind? Maybe it's a wind break. Maybe it's like a farting contest.
According to the little document here, the Olympics, the Paris Olympics, is wanting to make room for events which are more youthful and urban based.
Okay.
So in 2024, they will introduce breaking, which is breakdancing.
Oh.
Breakdancing is coming to the Olympics.
It's about time. It's only been around for 50 years.
They also added surfing this year. So we're going to have surfing in Tahiti. But I can't wait. Does this mean that they have a mirror ball? Are they going to have pieces of cardboard?
Will there be a lighting designer involved?
Are they going to do it on the streets of Paris? And where's this breakdancing going to take place?
That's interesting. But the surfing I'm kind of turned on to because, we're hosting the Olympics in Los Angeles in like 8 years or something like that. And that means that we'll probably have surfing competition right down the street from me in Huntington Beach.
Well, they're also adding sport climbing and 3-on-3 basketball.
Very interesting. I like the 3-on-3 basketball idea.
Youthful and urban.
Right.
Has nothing to do with lighting.
No, but we can figure something out. I think it's very funny, though. It's taken them this long to do breakdancing because that really has been around forever. But it's going to be cool. It's very entertaining. That's for damn sure.
The first time I saw breakdancing was in Brooklyn, New York in the 1970s, early 80s. And the guys came in with they would find empty refrigerator boxes on the streets and they would flatten out the cardboard box and they would spin around on the boxes. And they didn't even have a name at that time. I remember lighting some of those guys.
That's pretty cool. So let's get started, guys. Steve has our first listener question.
It comes from David in Georgia. And David says, I am just getting started in the business. How do you keep a crew focused? I feel that I'm not completely in control some days. Oh, okay.
This is a good question.
I'm sure we all have different approaches to how we keep our crew in control. But what I would say, there's like 3 or 4 things you have to do. The first thing is you really need to come prepared.
Donuts.
If you're not donuts are a big thing. There you go.
Yeah, it's like the key to the city.
If you're not prepared, I mean, it starts right there. You walk in the door and it goes downhill. While you're having your morning donut and cup of coffee, have it with a department head and talk about the goals you're trying to achieve, in the morning and the afternoon. Get a schedule worked out and then leave the department heads alone. Start strong, finish strong. Respect those breaks and be sure to respect the cleanup break at the end of the day. But if you're just if you're micromanaging people and you're running around and they're starting something and you're pulling them off of it and have them do something else, if you are the center, if you're the black hole of chaos, then this is going to go right to your crew.
Yeah.
I don't know. Besides donuts, what else do you guys do?
Well, the donuts are very important, but like what Steve says, you talk to your master electrician or production electrician, who's ever dealing with that, about what you want to get done. I usually like to do that even before I hit the theater. I usually have the electrician's email. Really, the first thing that I always do, especially if I'm in a new theater and I've never worked with the crew before, is before we get started, I meet the whole electrics crew. And I tell them, and this is something that I think is really important, and especially when you're overseas, is first thing you do is you meet everybody, you shake everyone's hand. I don't know if we can do that post-COVID, but that's what I used to do. And I tell them, I said, listen, I would say, I am a guest in your theater, and I respect, the way you do things. So please keep me informed of breaks or things like that, anything, so I can make sure that I follow your procedures, especially when it comes to safety, because safety procedures are different everywhere. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. Also, something that always scores a lot of points with crews is if you're in a rehearsal and you have a couple of electricians up in the cove and follow spots, and you're getting close to time, right? At the end of the rehearsal, let's say the rehearsal ends at 10 or 11 usually, and the cleanup is at 10 minutes to 11. And it takes these electricians like at least 15 minutes to get down from there because they have to put stuff away. They have to climb down. I always break the follow spot operators first. And I'll usually tell them about 20 minutes before, sometimes even earlier, if I know that we're not going to need the follow spots for the end of that rehearsal, I say spots can come down, right? And they really appreciate that because a lot of designers don't do that. And that word is just doing something like that little thing spreads word among the whole crew, like, hey, that designer's cool. He let us, come down. And so we weren't, late. There's nothing worse than like coming down and everybody's gone already and the ghost light's out, So I think that's a good thing to do.
Well, I didn't know because, we just didn't do it in the Appalachian Mountains. I had no idea what a cleanup was until I got to New York. And so that's the same thing. If you don't know what cleanup is, they stop the call. They stop the action on stage, and the crew has time to clean up. So at the end of the evening at 11 o'clock, they walk out the door with you. So there's nothing worse than saying, "Oh, can we just do a couple more things?" It's not 11
do it in the
yet.
morning.
No,
Yeah.
It's cleanup.
It's cleanup time, exactly. And I sometimes early in my career, I was working with directors who got really pissy about that. Like, why can't we work another 5 minutes? Because they have to go. And usually the stage manager will break them. The stage manager is very conscious that they're a good stage manager of what the crew times are. And again, that's something you learn usually at the beginning when it's like, tell me about the breaks. How do the breaks work here? And make sure your assistant understands it. Because your assistant is sort of responsible for keeping you conscious of time. Because I rarely look at my watch when I'm focusing. And my assistant will say, you got 15 minutes. Okay, great. So let's, pick up the pace or whatever.
The other thing that I do is I'll take one of my business cards out and I'll write everyone's name on the back of my business card and stick it in my shirt pocket so that I can pull that card out. It doesn't have to be a secret. I'm pulling the card out. So when I call up to the flyman for some reason, I'm saying, hey, John, or hey, Sarah, as opposed to hey, buddy, or hey, you. Yeah. It goes a long way to use people's names.
Yeah, very good.
Well, you guys have been incredibly specific, so I'm going to be a little bit more philosophical. And I think you all said this in your own way, both of you. But I thought about a couple of stories because the question says, I'm just getting started in the business, and I'm thinking back to my early days when I would walk in, and there was always, now this is maybe not the case anymore, but when I would meet the master electrician or the lighting director, it always seemed like they were testing me. Like there was a little bit of arrogance there, and it was like, who's this kid, right? And sometimes they kind of caught me unprepared. And I feel like it's important that there's two things that ought to happen in sequence. I think you both said it in your own way, but let me see if I can crystallize a bit. They need to sense that you are competent. Steve talked about you got to have your act together. You sort of do. And if you don't, if you're just sort of wishy-washy, they're like already you're sort of losing what I think is the second most important thing, which is their respect. David talked about ways of getting that through socialization, making sure, calling people by name. All of those things build respect. So I would say first, you need to have your act together so your competence will come across clearly. That's one way you're going to have control over the crew. The second thing, their respect, which means they're going to do for you what you need, and that respect needs to be mutual. And then after you've got those two kind of set, then you can shoot for some likability. Then you can go, then the donut time and the break times become more collegial. So I think those three things are really important. And if you can get those things established, then I don't think control will be an issue. It won't be about control. It'll be about camaraderie.
It sounds like they're not respecting them from her note. And I think that could be a problem because I know that this happens a lot. There's a lot of misogyny in some crews, and that's a real big problem, has been for many, many years. And I remember talking to Marilyn Renegal about it, and I asked her about it. This is back in 1979. And I said, what do you do? She goes, I asked her, I said, why do you always wear a blazer and jeans? I mean, I love the look, but why? And she goes, because I want them to respect me. And I look a lot more respectable. I'm not coming in a dress. I will never come in a dress, but I will come like this, and they respect me. Plus, she's respected because she was a great designer and she knew what the hell she was doing.
That's what I'm saying.
Competency.
It's hard to not respect competency. Yeah. So you sort of have to. So if you're going in and you're wishy-washy and you don't really know where you're headed, then that lack of competency shows. And if you really are competent, you don't have to pretend that you are. You're going to exude it.
Right, which gives you another reason to do your sectioning really well. Because if you hung a light and you're ready to focus it and the electrician's up there and you stand up on a platform and that light is blasting into a border.
You didn't think it through.
That's right. And all the electricians are going to know that you don't know what you're doing or you didn't do your homework. Because, sectioning...
Then the respect quotient goes down.
It goes way down. It will go diving down. So, and when you make a mistake, admit it. It's okay.
Well, people will be forgiving if you are competent.
Right.
People do make mistakes.
Of course.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I go to the master, I said, what do you think? Is there a hanging position? But that we can make this work. I mean, can we put some lights behind that flying piece? If they're real theater people, and most of them are because they're pros, they will come up with an idea that maybe you didn't have. So I always appreciate that. I really do.
I've always found, this is controversial here. I have always found that my best experiences are with a union crew. Uh-huh. I really appreciate the IA, and typically, I can count maybe 3 or 4 times I've had a problem in my career, and those problems have always been with theaters that were non-union, and they were more union than the union, and it's like, there was just this weird thing that they were angry the minute you walked in the door. I don't know, they probably had reason to be over the years, but I've always found the IA to be, tough, but they're forgiving and they're helpful if you ask for help.
Yeah, exactly. Just be
union
humble.
pride.
Yeah.
Union pride.
Yeah. Cool.
Sheila from Portland asks, I will be taking part in the upcoming URTA MFA design interviews. Any advice on how to organize my portfolio? How many photos of each show? For that matter, how many shows and how much tech work? Well, I made a few notes on this question. I'm going to have an opinion, and I'm sure we're going to have a little bit of differences of opinion. So how to organize it? I would say simple. Don't make it complicated. Make it an easy roadmap to get through. Don't overload it. Don't do too much. Keep it simple and make it clear. So the questions don't have to what is this? Where's this from? In other words, clarity of organization, I think is really helpful. I would also say about that part, but how many photos? I would say, let's start with this idea. You're curating your work. So it ought to be well curated. What's in, what's out. Really think about what needs to be in to show your best work and what's out. Doesn't need to be everything. If I was going to put numbers on it, number of shots per show, okay, I'll give you like the IES does not tell you how many foot candles of light. They will give you a range, 5 to 15 foot candles, 20 to 40 foot candles. Okay. Pictures per show, Stan K says 6 to 8, debatable. Okay, how many shows? 3 to 5. Those are my ranges. And in terms of technical work, it depends. Depends upon where you're at in your career, what kind of job you're looking for. So, for example, if you want to come to Florida, I want to see the design work, but I also am hiring you to be an electrician. So I'm giving you a job and I'm giving you an education. So you want to be a designer, I need to see the design work. If you're going to work for me, I need to have some sense of your technical capabilities because that's what I'm going to pay you for your 20 hours a week. So that depends on the situation.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to say one thing, and that is have a lot of process work. I really don't care about finished renderings and all that other stuff and, and what you can do on a computer. I want to know if you can think like a designer. I want to know if you know how to tell a story. And you do that by showing us process work, by showing us that you understand the play, that you had a concrete approach to the play and a point of view, and that it was relevant to you and important to you. I can't tell you how many undergraduate students that I interviewed in my career when I asked them, so why do you like this show? Why are you showing this show? Well, I thought it was cool. Well, it's a musical. I like musicals. It's like, I'm not interested in you. I'm not. I want someone who says, I did this show because right now this is happening in our world. And it's really important to me that, we have something to say about this.
I have to push back because those two things that it's not binary. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Somebody who can make pretty pictures and somebody who can tell a story are not separate items.
I agree with you, Stan. The problem is that's all there is. I don't know if they could tell a story. That's why I said process work. All right. But a lot of people think that it's all about flash and presentation. Yes, it's important to have presentation. And certainly if you have ability in that type of skill, that software, then you should show it. Absolutely. But I'm not really that interested. That takes me 2 seconds to see. I want to look through your process book. Obviously you won't be able to do this in this case, but you could have a series of slides showing the process of how you got to this idea, and also with maybe a little video that explains it. Okay.
Or a narrative, something written is always. I always
that's
like
fine.
to read
Narrative's fine too. But it could be research. It could be anything. But it needs to tell me that you make a personal connection with the show, because really everything else can be taught. I mean, you go to Stan's school. He has all the stuff he can teach you, and same thing with Steve, right? But they'll also teach you how to design. And we need to know whether you can think like a designer. Otherwise, you're not really a designer. You're not an artist.
Well, yeah, if you're just tweaking knobs on a screen, that's not design. That's playing a video game, right? That has to. But even I think all of this. I think there's connective tissue between all these things.
I would only say, as far as portfolio goes, 6 shots. I don't need to see more than 6 shots of a show, and I would not do these composite pages where there are 5 photographs on one page.
Right.
I would say, no smaller than an 8x10. So 6 8x10s of each show. If you're applying for a school and you're saying, I want to do technology and design, then I would probably show my technology, then my design work. Otherwise, if you're simply looking at design, I would show my design work. And I'm not so concerned about technology, so I wouldn't even bother showing that. I will tell you a story. I saw this kid years ago in New York, and he had like the worst portfolio I'd ever seen. I mean, it was terrible. And no one interviewed this student. And I thought, I'll do a mercy interview. So I interviewed this kid. And I said, your portfolio is really kind of odd. It's kind of clumsy. Why did you do that? And they said, this is what my teacher told me to do. And I thought what was interesting, I said, well, that's too bad. And then they said, I've got this other stuff underneath my table. And they had boxes. They had brought everything with them. I took that student right into the program because all the stuff he or she had been told not to show was quite fantastic.
Wow.
And that was light plots, that was process, that was scripts, that was magic sheets, that was notes about how he or she had worked. And, so portfolios are tricky things. I don't think they want to be simply just Kodak moments of a show. I do kind of agree with David. Process is really important. The last thing I would say is don't fall in love with your portfolio. Have someone look at it, and have a director look at it. Have the TD look at it. Have the department chair look at it. Have a lot of people look at the portfolio, and if they say this shot is not very good, then maybe it's not very good. So I would be careful about what you show.
Donna G. from Valdosta, Georgia asks, how do you organize a focus? Well, this is very interesting because it sort of relates to our first question about dealing with crews. And I also said a couple of things that I just want to reinforce here because it's really, really important. You organize a focus with your assistant and your master electrician and your technical director. It's that simple. And you do it long before you get to the theater. Most shows that I'm doing nowadays are extremely complex. They have revolves in them. They have flying scenery. They have trucks that move on and off. So you really need to organize that because if you're working in North America, obviously you're going to be very limited in time. And one thing that Steve Shelley I always say this about Steve's book because that first chapter is fantastic. It's on limitations. And it's very important that you know how much time you have in the load-in and how much time you have to focus. Before you do the light plot, you need to know this stuff so that you can actually design a light plot that's possible to focus in that amount of time. Because sometimes there are platforms in the way and sometimes you have to use focus tracks. Sometimes it's a multi-set show and you're going to have to figure out what scenery needs to be in and out and how to most efficiently do this. And this is when your electrician and TD really comes in handy. Always make sure, and it's usually the case, but I just want to make sure that there's always someone on the fly rail because you never know when you're going to need someone to fly some scenery in just to focus one light. And if there's nobody up there and you've got a whole focus crew and you hit that light and you realize that you need that wall in and someone's down on the deck, they need to go up there, you could wait 5-10 minutes. And it brings your focus to a screaming halt. Oh, also, will there be focus tracks? And if there are focus tracks, how do you work with that focus track safely? Again, these are all things you plan before load-in. And usually, again, the master electrician and the tech director said, we're not going to be able to focus this without focus tracks, so then we got to leave some lines for focus tracks. If multiple sets, plan on what you can focus in each set. And again, this is organizing the focus. Which fixtures you're going to focus in each set. And which set you can focus most of the show in. I always start in that set. If I can focus most of the show in Act 2, I will ask them to set up Act 2, and that's where I'll focus, and I'll spend 70% of my time in that act. And then we'll go to Act 3, and I'll focus the 30 lights that are in that act. And then I'll go to Act 1 and focus the 15 lights in that act. And why do I do that? Because going to Act 1, Act 1 is already, saving that for last, Act 1 is already set up for rehearsal that night. You don't have to stop 15 minutes early to set up Act 1 because you're sitting in Act 3. So these little things are really, really important so that it saves time because you never know what's going to happen with focus. Lamps burn out. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. You always have to be prepared. And don't get hung up. Because again, if you're working in North America and a light is not working, you got to decide right then whether or not you're going to keep working on that light or if you just should just cut it and move on. And believe me, I've cut lots of lights in my career. And your assistant needs to be thinking one step ahead of you, ready to call out the channels, make sure that there's furniture out there that you need. Like if you're going to focus this whole area where there's a sitting area and there's no props out there, the assistant should go to the prop person and say, can we have the sofa on spike, please? And do that in advance, not when you get to the light. You may want to do that 2 or 3 lights in advance. So all that stuff is really super important.
I was just thinking, the best assistant I ever had did all that stuff. And I remember I was in the show, I had a upstage to downstage diagonal. It's a couple feet wide. We walked into the theater, and I went downstairs to get a cup of coffee maybe before the focus started. And when I came back up, she had laid out in tape that diagonal so that the electrician could make a really sharp cut on it. There would be none of this in-out stuff. It was just all done. But she was always a step ahead of me. And you're right. It was like, where's the chair? Oh, it's right here. You brought it out on stage. Where's the rover? Oh, it's right there. You've put it in the wing. So an assistant, a good assistant, they need to be standing up there when you get your Tony Award because they certainly help get it for you.
You better believe it. You better believe it. And that's, I read Ann McMill's book. Again, I always tell people this because, she wrote the definitive book on assisting. But it's always about thinking ahead, thinking one step ahead. If I was the designer, what would I want out there? I would want a taped out lane, so that it's great. And you hold on to assistants like that if you can.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk is sponsored by...
From across the pond, it's the Cheeky Rigger of Sheffield. Christmas is only a few weeks away, and it's never too early to shop for that special lighting designer in your life. Do you want your man or your woman to make a big, bold statement when he or she walks on stage? Then you need Cheeky Rigger Cologne. You might remember our fragrances from last year. Funky Roadcase, Arcing Ozone, and Stinky Shoe on the Bus. Well, once again, the Cheeky Rigger of Sheffield offers 3 new scents. Let's start with Old Crispy, inspired by the worn-out cable that has a long and distinguished record of service in your theater, but is now a little past its prime and should be replaced. That crackled, weathered, blistered cable that you refuse to toss aside. That's right, Old Crispy Cologne has the scent of fragility and disaster just waiting to happen. That scent of Old Crispy shouts, "Don't toss me aside. I still have value. Don't send me to the old folks' home." Splash a little on the next time you go get that free cup of coffee down at Cracker Barrel. And if you have an 829 card with a membership number of 1 through 10, we will send you a bottle for free. Old Crispy. Who can say when a spark will ignite the fire of desire? Next, we offer Gobo Aftershave. Just like its namesake, Gobo, or Go Before. Gobo Aftershave will announce your arrival. In fact, we can guarantee that Gobo Aftershave can be detected from no less than 15 meters. Now, when you walk into the theater, you'll be greeted with cries of, "What is that smell? Is that you? Oh. And can someone open a window?" Imagine the confined space of a faculty meeting. Gobo Aftershave, go big or go home. And finally, our masterpiece, our opus, our piece de resistance. Piece of resistance perfume. Like water flowing through a pipe or current flowing through a wire, piece of resistance perfume shouts conductance is on the way. A hot, driving force trying to find balance has entered the game of love. Rubber, plastic, paper, glass, and wood cannot offer insulation or safety from your power. Piece of resistance perfume. Get too close, and you might get burned by the current of love. The Cheeky Rigger of Sheffield. We make underwear, too.
That's good. That's really funny. Speaking of scents, did you watch Rudy Giuliani fart at that hearing? That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. The woman next to him gave him a look. Oh, my God. I thought that was so funny. So...
Saturday Night Live could not write this stuff. The Onion could not write this stuff.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those crazy ducks tell us that, once again, it's time for another installment of Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is about... You like that? And today's Let's Talk About is about when taking a student into the profession, describe the delicate balance of the student-mentor relationship. Is it like bringing a professional assistant? Do you become friends?
Oh, I see the question.
I
see. I misunderstood.
I must say, I got this subject from my webinar the other night because there was a student named Taylor who asked me that question. She didn't have the questions at the end, is like bring a professional assistant and you become friends. But that, I believe, was part of the discussion, which is interesting because all of us have brought students into the profession to assist us as a learning opportunity, but you're also working with professionals. So Oh,
Right.
now that Stan knows what the question's about,
Yeah,
I'm going to kick it off to you, buddy.
Yeah, recalculating my thoughts. Are you going to ask me to answer this question while fast thinking it?
That's right.
Which is a little dangerous.
Do you want
But
some
I
old
would say-
crispy cologne?
That'll take care
Actually,
of it.
I'd rather have some Fiesta Resistance right now. I haven't done it in a couple of years now, but I think when I've done that, I've tried to make clear to the hosting entity that I will be bringing a student. And so the expectations have to be modulated. And I also will check with the venue that they are comfortable with that. Sometimes they are not. Right, but I think everybody needs to be aware that this person is a student. So that if that works out, then that's good. I make sure the student stays in their own room and has, they're not gonna. I won't share a room with the student. There sort of has to be a certain professional distance. And then in terms of the are they ready for it? Right, so it's sort of like you're taking them into the deep end of the pool, and you don't want it to be a reflection on you because you're a pro in the situation. So I usually try to give them work in preparation for the trip to the venue to see where they're at, and then I see how they respond. And if they're picking, you want that assistant to able to kind of read your mind, like they want to sort of anticipate what your needs are or what the needs are before you have to ask them. Are they really plugged in? So I do like a sort of testing ground in the weeks before and having them draft for me. If I can give them a napkin plot and then I say by tomorrow I want to see this drafted and let's see how that looks. Do they get it to me? How does it look? How precise are they? And then I have a sense of how much responsibility I can give them in the field. So that's sort of it's a little bit of a test prep in a way. If that answers the question. And then once we're there, I will treat them as much as a professional as possible. Let me give an example on another side of it. We send students to the Oslo here as assistants, which is a pretty significant regional theater, and the designers who come in are pretty much up-and-comers or already at the top of their game. And the way that those designers assess the student coming in, how much responsibility they can give. They want a resume in advance. Sometimes they even have a conversation with the student in advance, and then they give them responsibility slowly and watch the response. 90% of the time, it works out well. We have had a couple of instances where a student will, in the interest of helping the designer, step out of bounds. Right, and get involved in something they probably shouldn't have. So there's a what I call situational awareness that both I want to have and the student wants to have in that scenario of being aware of the situation and where the boundaries are. Like here's an example: we had one situation where I'm not going to mention any names with the student assistants. Well, there was a scenic and a lighting student. They're out to dinner with the director, the producer, the set designer, and the lighting designer, and they're discussing an issue they're having. And one of the students decided that they had a solution, right? And started yammering and just broke in like they had, and it did not go over well. Like knowing your place. Now that was rare because we do the same thing at the school. We want to have a sense of how that student behaves under pressure in a situation before we send them out to work as an assistant. So those are sort of my techniques for assessing that.
It's funny you mentioned that, Stan, because it brings me back about 15 years when I was at Ming's Clam Bake as a respondent, and Francis Aronson and I decided to go and see the students together as a team. And this one student from NYU, he was very eager, and he says, I want to ask you a question. He says, what's the most important quality that you're looking for in an assistant? And Francis looked at him and said, know when to shut up.
Right.
That's really
right.
so true when you think about it.
Know when to keep your ears open and your mouth closed.
Exactly.
It's absolutely right. And that's a big part of it, I
think.
Yeah,
well, the reason, again, what we talked about at the webinar the other night was the fact that I do the same thing, Stan. I take them to, everything a normal assistant would do in the profession, I get them involved in. They are part of it. They come out and have drinks with us after rehearsal. They have dinners with us and lunches and do all the breaks. All that is part of it because they need to be part of the team. And because I usually only work with directors I know really well right now, they understand it because I've taken students out with me, I don't know, for about 30 years now, I think it's been. And so they know the situation. But my students, they know already. I make sure they know what they're doing before I even take them or commit to taking them. Because
Right. That's the key.
That is the key. That's very important. You don't want to overload them, with something they don't know.
It's not fair to them either.
Yeah, and it's going to slow things down, and that's going to be very upsetting. And I also talk to them about etiquette. And etiquette is really super important, and it's different when you're obviously in the profession than when you're doing a school show. It's just different. It just is. And I must say, when I was an intern at the Dallas Opera and I was a student at SMU, John Gleason said, "Come on, we're going out to lunch." I was like, "Oh my God, I thought I was going to go to McDonald's." And I went out with him and the director, and I felt like part of the team. And it was wonderful. I'd never felt that before. Because as a student, when you go to lunch, usually you're doing something else, or you're still working on the board or whatever. You don't understand that there are really important breaks and that they need to be social. There needs to be a break from the theater and a break from the problems, because it's rare that we go and have lunch and say, "Okay, how are we going to fix this transition?" No. We're not going to do that. We're going to take a break, and I'll figure it out when I'm walking back to the theater. So I think all that's really important. How about you, Steve?
Well, I think there's a distinguishing line here. I do not take a student as an assistant until they're ready to do the project. Now, sometimes I take an observer. And I know that's kind of, slicing it a little thin there. But if I take an observer with me, then I say, "Here's my student, and he or she will be observing us today." And they might do a little paperwork or get us coffee or something, but really they're here to see how a professional crew interacts with the designer and puts a show on. So observers, any senior or first-year student can easily travel with me as an observer. But if I'm going to take an assistant, then that's usually a second or third-year student, and they have got some stuff under their belt, and they're ready to walk into a union house and work. Now, I don't work on Broadway, so that's a whole different world. But as far as regional theater goes or doing something in Europe, I'm perfectly happy with the students I take with me.
Yeah. Usually when I do the summers in Central City, I have 2 or 3 assistants. I bring 2 or 3 students with me. Someone is going to be serving as a first assistant, someone as a second assistant, and someone usually as an assistant if I'm doing set design also. And they're assisting me in that vein, or projections or whatever. And that first year student is someone who's already served at Central City the year before, usually as a second assistant. They were taught how to be an assistant from the first assistant. Then the second assistant is usually a new student. Sometimes it's an undergrad. Now I'm just taking undergrads with me.
I want to answer the last question. It says, do you become friends? I used to, when I was younger, think it was nice to become friends with students early. Now I'm of a different mindset. My students become my friends post-graduation, not before. That doesn't mean we don't socialize, but we don't become friends until after they graduate. At a school party, or I might have a reception at the house for the design area in a sort of a professional context. But I'm not going to a rock concert with them. I'm not socializing with them. And in fact, I've even to the point where you're going to think I'm crazy here, but I learned this the hard way. They addressed me as professor, and when they graduate, I say, now you can call me Stan. And it seems artificial, but because what I learned is if you're too informal early and you need to be the authority figure at some point, you can't roll that back once you've broken down that barrier. So I need to have that professional separation until they graduate, and then all that goes away.
Well, Steve has our last question of the day.
It comes from Robbie in the Texas Panhandle. And Robbie writes, when you pack a truck, what goes to the front and what goes to the back? Or does it even matter?
Yes, it
Robbie,
does.
I'm calling Bumpkus on this. Where the heck you from? Are you from California?
That's what I'm saying.
You cannot be.
Panhandle.
You cannot be from the Texas Panhandle.
That's my first thought.
I want to know what goes in the front or the back.
He must live in Dexter. I bet he lives in Dexter, Texas.
Okay, so there is a nose and a tail on a semi. So let's just get that out of the way up front. It's a whole lot easier. Let's take that to the nose of the trunk. Let's leave that on the tail of the truck. Or let's take it, sometimes up in the front, there's a little elevated area. I've always heard it called the dance floor, but I'm not sure what the real name of it is. So here's the rule of thumb. When you walk into the arena, what is the first thing you need? And whatever the first thing you need, whatever the first thing is you need, it needs to be on the tail of the truck.
Absolutely.
So, think about it that way. You're walking into the arena. What's the first thing you need? You probably need the power distribution. You probably need the tie-in. You probably need the motors. You probably need the rigging. So that is on the tail of the truck.
You definitely need the tape measure.
Yes. And, probably working your way forward. Think about how your show loads in. Probably working your way forward, there's dimming and control, then there's probably sound, then there's probably lights on the nose of the truck. Think about it when you're taking your show down. What is the first thing that's coming down? Probably the lights and the truss. So that would be the first thing in the truck. What is the last thing you're finished with that evening? And that's probably power distribution, motors, and rigging. So yeah, I think it does matter how you pack your truck.
All of that sounds absolutely correct in thinking through the load in and load out and where the stuff is. But as a former truck driver, I'll offer another perspective. If you're hauling that thing and you're driving it, there is, and we used to pack trucks quite a bit at Production Arts at 636 11th Avenue in Manhattan for all kinds of tours. There was sort of a desire on a long bed truck to put the heaviest stuff in the nose and the lighter stuff in the back, because if you've got a lot of weight in the back, and once that gets momentum, as the wind hits it and it shifts it, it can just jackknife you. So truck drivers tend to want to put the heavy stuff up front and the lighter stuff on the tail.
Well, you probably are if you're putting sound and truss up front. I mean, sound's pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want a rule of thumb, I went and asked the DOT, but a rule of thumb is that if you take a look at a semi these days, and you're probably using, everyone says that's a semi going down the road. That's probably a dry van trailer is what you're seeing. That's the most common trailer you're going to see on the road. Typically, those trailers can handle 1,000 pounds a foot.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's a lot of weight.
Well, the rockin' sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate us, the law firm Reflect, Flocked, Flare, and Glare, and their paralegal, Snoot, will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
And by the way, I think Giuliani's joining the team. He's looking for a job.
He is looking, but can we afford the $20,000 a day?
Listen, as long as he can fart in public, that's all he cares about.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and from deep in the heart of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more crazy happenings in our crazy industry.
All of that and a new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Ho, ho, ho.